I've been carrying this secret for so long that it feels like it's carved into my bones. Every time I walk through the front door of Samuel's house, my heart does this stupid little skip because there's always the chance that Jack might be home. It's pathetic, really, being 20 years old and still getting butterflies over my best friend's older brother like some lovesick teenager. But here I am, 3 years into college, and the feelings haven't faded even a little bit. Drop a red heart if this hits you in the comments below. The worst part isn't even the wanting him. It's the way he looks at me like I'm some kind of inconvenience he has to tolerate. Jack's always been polite enough when Samuel's around, but there's this coldness in his eyes whenever they land on me, like he's mentally calculating how quickly he can escape whatever room I'm in. I've convinced myself over the years that he genuinely dislikes me, and honestly, it's probably for the best. At least his obvious distaste for my company keeps me from doing something monumentally stupid, like actually believing I might have a chance with him. Samuel's been my best friend since we were 12, and I've been in love with his brother for almost as long. Jack's 2 years older than us, which felt like a lifetime when we were kids but seems like nothing now. I remember the exact moment it started. Jack was 16, home from some school event, still wearing his varsity jacket and looking like everything I didn't even know I wanted yet. He'd ruffled my hair in passing, calling me Sam's little tag-along with this grin that made my stomach flip in ways I couldn't understand at the time. By the time I figured out what those feelings meant, they'd already taken roots so deep I couldn't dig them out. The thing is, Jack's always been kind to everyone else. I've watched him joke around with Samuel's other friends, seen him charm their parents' friends at dinner parties, witnessed him being genuinely warm and engaging with pretty much every person who crosses his path. Everyone except me. With me, he's different, distant, almost careful, like he's afraid of saying the wrong thing or getting too close. I used to think maybe I'd done something to offend him when we were younger, but I've replayed every interaction we've ever had and I can't figure out what it could have been. Samuel's completely oblivious to the whole thing, which is probably a blessing. He's always trying to include Jack in whatever we're doing, always suggesting we all hang out together, never noticing the way his brother's jaw tightens when he suggests it or how I suddenly find reasons to be busy. Come on, Jack can drive us, Samuel will say, or Jack's going to that party too, we should all go together, and I have to pretend like the idea doesn't make my pulse race while simultaneously dreading the awkward tension that follows. The summer Jack graduated high school, I thought maybe things would change. He was 18, I was 16, and the age gap felt less significant somehow. I'd started working out more, paying attention to my clothes, basically doing everything a hopelessly infatuated teenager does when they're trying to get noticed. But if anything, Jack seemed to pull away even more. He'd find excuses to leave when I came over, or he'd stay holed up in his room, only emerging when he was sure I was gone. Samuel complained about it sometimes, how his brother had become antisocial, how he never wanted to hang out anymore, but he never connected it to my presence. College was supposed to be my escape from all of this. Jack went to state. I went to the community college across town, and for the first time in years, I could hang out at Samuel's house without constantly bracing myself for those uncomfortable encounters. But even with Jack gone, I couldn't shake the feelings. If anything, his absence made them stronger, like some kind of cruel joke. I'd catch myself wondering what he was doing, whether he was dating anyone, if he ever thought about home. About me. The answer to that last one was obviously no, but that didn't stop my stupid brain from wondering. Now he's back for summer break, and I'm right back to being that lovesick kid who can't function normally around him. He's different, though. Older, more confident, somehow even more beautiful than he was before. College has been good to him. He's filled out more, carries himself with this easy assurance that makes my mouth go dry. But the way he looks at me hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten worse. More intense somehow, like he's not just avoiding me but actively trying to warn me away. I've gotten good at reading the signs. When I text Samuel to hang out, I can usually tell within the first few minutes whether Jack's home based on Samuel's responses. Want to go to the park? Usually means Jack's around and Samuel's trying to get us out of the house. Come over, we can play video games in the basement, means the coast is clear. It's pathetic that I've developed this entire system just to avoid making Jack uncomfortable, but here we are. The really twisted part is that I've started using his obvious dislike of me as a kind of shield. When I catch myself daydreaming about what it would be like to kiss him, or what his hands might feel like on my skin, I remind myself of the way he looks at me, like I'm something unpleasant he's trying to scrape off his shoe. It's effective, if brutal. Hard to maintain romantic fantasies when you're convinced the object of your affection finds you genuinely annoying. But sometimes, in my weaker moments, I wonder if I'm reading this all wrong. If maybe there's something else behind that careful distance he maintains. It's probably just wishful thinking, the kind of desperate hope that comes from wanting something so badly you start seeing signs that aren't there. But there are these moments, brief, fleeting instances where I catch him looking at me with something that doesn't look like dislike. It looks like something else entirely, something that makes my breath catch and my heart race before he looks away, and I convince myself I imagined it. Samuel's texting me now, asking if I want to come over for dinner. Their parents are grilling out, he says, and it'll be fun. He doesn't mention whether Jack will be there, which probably means he will be. I stare at my phone for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I should say no. I should make up some excuse and spend the evening doing literally anything else. But I'm going to say yes, because I'm an idiot and a masochist, and because some part of me will always choose the torture of being near Jack over the emptiness of staying away. The familiar chaos of Samuel's house had always been my sanctuary, but now it felt like navigating a minefield. Every corner I turned, every room I entered, carried the possibility of running into Jack, and my body had developed an embarrassing Pavlovian response to his presence. The sound of his voice from another room would make my pulse quicken. The creak of floorboards overhead when he was in his bedroom would make me hyper-aware of every movement above. Even catching a glimpse of his discarded jacket on the back of a chair would send my heart into an uncomfortable rhythm that took several minutes to settle. Samuel's house had become my second home over the years, to the point where his parents treated me like another son. I had my own drawer in the guest room, my own spot at the dinner table, my own responsibilities when it came to chores. But Jack's return had transformed this comfortable familiarity into something fraught with tension. I found myself cataloging his schedule obsessively, when he went for runs, when he showered, when he retreated to his room with his laptop. Not because I was trying to seek him out, but because I was desperately trying to avoid the kind of awkward encounters that left me stumbling over my words and him looking at me with that expression I couldn't quite decipher. The worst part was how Samuel seemed completely oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that followed Jack and me around like a storm cloud. My best friend would casually suggest we hang out in the living room when Jack was already there, sprawled across the couch watching something on his phone. Or he'd disappear to take a shower or grab something from his car, leaving Jack and me alone in spaces that suddenly felt too small and too quiet. During these moments, I would become acutely aware of every sound, the way Jack's breathing changed when I entered a room, the soft tap of his fingers against his phone screen, the rustle of fabric when he shifted position. The silence between us wasn't comfortable. It was loaded with something I couldn't name and didn't dare examine too closely. Jack's behavior toward me had always been difficult to interpret, but his return from college had intensified whatever dynamic existed between us. There were moments when I caught him looking at me with an expression that seemed almost angry, his jaw tight and his eyes narrowed in a way that made my stomach drop. But then there were other moments when I'd glance up from my conversation with Samuel to find Jack's gaze lingering on me with something that looked almost like curiosity or perhaps assessment. These moments never lasted long. As soon as he realized I'd noticed, his expression would shift back to that careful neutrality that had become his default around me. The kitchen seemed to be our primary battleground, probably because it was the heart of the house and impossible to avoid entirely. I learned to recognize the sound of his footsteps approaching, heavier and more deliberate than Samuel's quick, light steps. When Jack entered the kitchen while I was there, the air would seem to thicken with unspoken tension. He'd move around me with careful precision, reaching for glasses or searching through cabinets while maintaining just enough distance that we never accidentally brushed against each other. But sometimes, when the space was particularly cramped, I'd catch a hint of a scent, something clean and masculine that made my head spin and my hands shake slightly as I tried to focus on whatever task had brought me there. The strangest part was how these encounters affected my friendship with Samuel. I found myself overcompensating, being louder and more animated when Jack was around, as if I could somehow convince both of them that I was completely unaffected by his presence. Samuel seemed to buy it, but sometimes I'd catch Jack watching these performances with something that looked like amusement, which only made me feel more foolish and transparent. It was exhausting, maintaining this facade of casual indifference while my entire nervous system seemed to be hyper-aware of Jack's every movement and expression. One afternoon, Samuel had convinced me to help him reorganize his room, a project that involved moving furniture and sorting through years of accumulated belongings. We'd been at it for hours, and I was beginning to feel the physical strain of lifting and shifting heavy items. Samuel had disappeared downstairs to grab us some drinks, leaving me alone with a pile of books that needed to be reshelved. I was focused on the task, trying to organize everything by subject, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My body tensed automatically, some instinct telling me it was Jack before he even appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching me work with that unreadable expression I'd come to both crave and dread. "Samuel's not here," he said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. It wasn't a question, but it felt like an accusation, as if my presence in his brother's room without Samuel there was somehow inappropriate or presumptuous. I kept my eyes focused on the books in my hands, trying to ignore the way his presence seemed to fill the entire doorway, blocking my escape route and making the room feel smaller and more intimate than it had moments before. "He went to get drinks," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded despite the way my heart was hammering against my ribs. "He'll be right back." I risked a glance in Jack's direction and immediately regretted it. He was studying me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight, his dark eyes moving over my face in a way that felt both invasive and thrilling. There was something in his expression that I couldn't interpret, not quite anger, but not friendliness either. Something deeper and more complicated that made my mouth go dry and my hands fumble with the books I was trying to organize. "You're here a lot," Jack observed, and there was something in his tone that made it sound like criticism. "More than you used to be." The implication hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Was he suggesting that I was overstaying my welcome? That my increased presence in his family's home was somehow problematic? Or was there something else behind his words, some other reason why my constant presence might be an issue for him specifically? I forced myself to shrug, trying to project a casualness I didn't feel. "Samuel and I have been friends for years," I said, focusing intently on alphabetizing a stack of textbooks. "His parents don't seem to mind." It was a defensive response, and I immediately regretted how it sounded. The last thing I wanted was to get into some kind of territorial dispute with Jack about my friendship with his brother. But there was something in his tone that had gotten under my skin, some suggestion that my presence was unwelcome or inappropriate. Jack was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel his gaze on me like a physical weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more controlled. "No, they don't mind," he agreed, and there was something in his tone that made me look up despite my better judgment. "But that doesn't mean everyone's comfortable with it." The words hit me like a physical blow, confirming what I'd always suspected but had never heard him say directly. He didn't want me there. My presence in his family's home, my friendship with his brother, my very existence in his orbit, it all made him uncomfortable. The sound of Samuel's footsteps on the stairs saved me from having to respond, but Jack's words echoed in my head for the rest of the afternoon. Even as Samuel and I continued our reorganization project, even as we joked and laughed and fell back into our familiar dynamic, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow intruding on space where I wasn't wanted. Jack's hostility toward me had always been a source of pain, but hearing it stated so directly was worse than I'd expected. It confirmed every insecurity I'd ever had about my place in this family, every fear that I was somehow imposing on their generosity and patience. But the strangest part was how Jack's behavior didn't seem to match his words. Over the following days, I noticed that he seemed to appear wherever Samuel and I were spending time, even when he claimed to find my presence uncomfortable. If we were in the backyard, he'd come out to shoot baskets at the hoop mounted above the garage. If we were in the living room, he'd settle into the armchair with his laptop, claiming he needed to work on something but spending most of his time glancing in our direction. If we were in the kitchen making snacks, he'd find reasons to come in and out, getting drinks or searching through cabinets for items he didn't seem to actually need. This pattern of behavior confused me more than outright hostility would have. If my presence truly made him uncomfortable, why did he keep putting himself in situations where he had to be around me? Why did he choose to study in the living room when Samuel and I were watching movies, or decide to do his laundry during the hours when he knew I'd be there? It was as if he was drawn to the very thing that supposedly bothered him, and I couldn't make sense of the contradiction. The tension between us seemed to be building towards something, though I couldn't imagine what. Every interaction felt charged with unspoken meaning. Every glance held weight that I couldn't interpret. Samuel remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrent between his brother and best friend, continuing to treat us both with the same casual affection he'd always shown. But I was becoming increasingly aware that the dynamic in the house had shifted since Jack's return, and I was somehow at the center of it without understanding why or how to navigate it. The worst part was how much I still wanted his approval, despite everything. Even knowing that he found my presence uncomfortable, even after his direct statement about not everyone being comfortable with my constant presence in his family's home, I still found myself hoping for some sign of acceptance or warmth from him. It was pathetic and self-destructive, but I couldn't seem to stop myself from seeking his attention, even when that attention came in the form of disapproval or hostility. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as I helped Samuel's mom set up tables in their backyard for what she'd cheerfully dubbed their annual summer kickoff barbecue. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been attending this same barbecue for 3 years running, yet I still felt like an outsider whenever Jack was around. Samuel had disappeared inside to help his dad with something, leaving me to arrange folding chairs while Mrs. Chin bustled around with tablecloths and citronella candles. "Leo, sweetheart, could you grab the cooler from the garage?" she called out, and I nodded, grateful for something to do with my hands. The garage was mercifully cool and dim, a welcome relief from both the heat and the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. I knew Jack would be here soon. He'd promised to bring ice and drinks, and I was already steeling myself for another afternoon of careful avoidance and stolen glances. I was wrestling with the heavy cooler when I heard footsteps behind me. "Need help with that?" Jack's voice made me freeze, my hands still gripping the cooler's handles. I hadn't heard him arrive, hadn't prepared myself for the sound of his voice in the quiet garage. "I've got it," I managed, though the cooler was clearly getting the better of me. Without waiting for my permission, Jack moved closer, his hands brushing mine as he took hold of the other side. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arms, and I had to force myself not to jerk away. "Thanks," I muttered, not meeting his eyes as we carried the cooler between us. The garage suddenly felt impossibly small, filled with the scent of motor oil and something else, something warm and distinctly Jack that made my head spin. "Leo," he said quietly, and something in his tone made me look up despite myself. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something there that made my breath catch, not the usual irritation or dismissal, but something softer, more uncertain. Then Samuel's voice rang out from the house, calling for Jack, and the moment shattered. "We should." Jack started, then seemed to change his mind. "Yeah, we should get this outside." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Neighbors arrived, the grill fired up, and Samuel's dad launched into his usual repertoire of dad jokes while flipping burgers. I found myself watching Jack more than I should have, cataloging the way he laughed at his uncle's stories, the way he helped serve food to the elderly couple from next door, the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached for something. I was dangerous territory, and I knew it, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. "You're being weird," Samuel said, dropping into the chair beside me with a paper plate loaded with potato salad. "You barely said 10 words all afternoon." "Just tired," I lied, forcing myself to focus on my friend instead of scanning the yard for his brother. "Long week at work." Samuel gave me a skeptical look, but didn't push it. That was one of the things I loved about him. He knew when to let things go. If only he knew what I was really thinking about, how his casual acceptance might evaporate in an instant. The thought made my stomach turn, and I excused myself to go inside for a drink. The kitchen was blissfully empty and air-conditioned, giving me a moment to collect myself. I was leaning against the counter, eyes closed, when I heard someone enter behind me. "You okay?" Jack's voice, closer than expected. I opened my eyes to find him standing in the doorway, genuine concern creasing his features. "Fine," I said automatically, but my voice came out rougher than intended. "Just needed to cool off." He nodded, moving to the refrigerator and pulling out a beer. For a moment, we stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of the barbecue drifting through the open windows. Then Jack spoke again, his voice carefully neutral. "You've been quiet today. More than usual." I wasn't sure if that was an observation or a criticism, so I just shrugged. Like I told Samuel, just tired. "Right." Jack twisted the cap off his beer, the metal making a soft pop. You know, you don't have to pretend with me. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I wasn't sure I understood. Pretend what? Jack's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something raw and unguarded there. That you're okay when you're not. That you don't feel. He trailed off, shaking his head. Never mind. No. What? The words came out before I could stop them. That I don't feel what? But Jack was already moving toward the door, his moment of vulnerability snapping shut like a door slamming. Forget it. We should get back outside. He left me standing there, heart racing and mind reeling. What had he been about to say? That I don't feel what? Uncomfortable? Unwelcome? Or something else entirely? I forced myself to wait a few minutes before following him back outside, using the time to splash cold water on my face and get my racing pulse under control. When I rejoined the party, Jack was deep in conversation with Samuel's dad about college football, but I caught him glancing my way more than once. The afternoon wore on, and I found myself studying Jack's behavior with new eyes. Where before I'd seen dismissal and irritation, now I wondered if I was missing something. The way he seemed to position himself where he could see me, even when talking to other people. The way his jaw tensed when Samuel's cousin made a joke at my expense. The way he'd lingered in the kitchen, like he'd wanted to say more. Was I imagining things? Reading too much into casual glances and offhand comments? The possibility that I might be projecting my own feelings onto innocent interactions was almost as terrifying as the alternative. As the sun began to set, guests started filtering out, leaving just family and me to clean up. I was stacking chairs when I became aware of being watched. I looked up to find Jack leaning against the porch railing, beer in hand, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. Our eyes locked, and this time, neither of us looked away. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words and possibilities I didn't dare name. Jack's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Jack, can you help me with these leftover? Mrs. Chen's voice cut through the tension like a knife, and Jack blinked, the spell broken. Yeah, sure, Mom, he said, but his voice was rougher than usual. He pushed off from the railing and disappeared into the house, leaving me standing there with my pulse racing and my hands shaking. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just coincidence and wishful thinking. But the way Jack had looked at me, the intensity in his gaze, it felt like something. It felt like recognition. Samuel appeared beside me, arms full of empty plates. You sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, I said, but my voice came out strained. It's been a long day. Tell me about it. I love these family things, but they're exhausting. Samuel grinned, oblivious to the emotional tornado spinning inside me. Hey, you want to hang out tomorrow? Maybe hit the movies. Yeah, sure, I agreed, though my mind was still reeling from whatever had just happened with Jack. Sounds good. As we finished cleaning up, I caught Jack watching me again, quick glances when he thought I wasn't looking, his gaze lingering on my face like he was trying to read something there. Each time our eyes met, I felt that same electric jolt, that same sense of standing on the edge of something momentous. When it was time to leave, I said my goodbyes to Samuel's parents and headed for my car. I was fumbling with my keys when Jack appeared beside me, materializing out of the gathering dusk like a ghost. Leo, he said quietly, and something in his voice made me turn to face him fully. Yeah. For a moment, he just looked at me, his expression cycling through emotions too quick for me to read. Then he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with the lingering scent of barbecue smoke. That thing I said earlier, in the kitchen, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. About pretending. My heart stopped. What about it? Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear in every line of his body. I see you sometimes, and I think maybe we're more alike than either of us wants to admit. The words hit me like a physical blow. What did that mean? What was he trying to tell me? Jack, I don't understand. Don't you? His eyes searched mine, and I saw something desperate there, something that made my breath catch. Because sometimes I think you see me too. Really see me. And it scares the hell out of me. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. What could I say? That yes, I saw him, that I'd been seeing him for years, that every moment of supposed hatred had only made me want him more? That I'd been terrified of my own feelings for so long that I'd convinced myself his dislike was safer than hope? I should go, Jack said suddenly, stepping back as if he'd realized how close we'd gotten. This is. I shouldn't have. Wait, I managed, finding my voice at last. Jack, wait. But he was already walking away, leaving me standing by my car with my heart pounding and my mind spinning. What had just happened? What had he been trying to tell me? I drove home in a daze, Jack's words echoing in my head. Sometimes I think you see me too. And it scares the hell out of me. What did that mean? Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Or was I so desperate for any sign of reciprocation that I was reading meaning into meaningless words? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The way Jack had looked at me across the yard. The tension in the kitchen. The loaded conversation by my car. None of it made sense if Jack simply disliked me. But if he didn't dislike me, if he felt something else entirely. The possibility was too terrifying and too wonderful to fully consider. Because if Jack felt even a fraction of what I felt for him, then everything I'd believed about our relationship was wrong. All those years of assuming his coldness was contempt, all those moments of self-protection and careful distance, what if it had all been based on a misunderstanding? What if Jack's hostility wasn't about disliking me at all? What if it was about something else entirely, something that scared him as much as my feelings scared me? I rolled over, burying my face in my pillow as the full weight of possibility crashed over me. Because if I was right, if Jack felt something for me too, then everything was about to change. And I had no idea if I was ready for that. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling through my mind, the way Jack had looked at me tonight, with an intensity that felt like recognition, like he was seeing something in me that he'd been trying not to see. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been imagining things after all. The party was supposed to be a distraction. Samuel had dragged me to Jake Morrison's house where half our graduating class was crammed into a living room that reeked of cheap beer and teenage desperation. I'd been nursing the same warm bottle for an hour, watching Samuel flirt with some girl from his chemistry class while I tried to shake off the confusion that had been eating at me since the barbecue 3 days ago. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jack's face in that moment when our gazes had locked across the backyard. The intensity in his dark eyes had haunted me, making me question everything I thought I knew about how he felt about me. I'd been replaying every interaction we'd ever had, searching for signs I might have missed, wondering if maybe his coldness wasn't contempt at all but something else entirely. Leo. Samuel's voice cut through my brooding. Come on, man, you look like someone died. It's a party. He was already tipsy, his cheeks flushed, and his words slightly slurred. Have some fun for once in your life. I forced a smile and took a sip of my beer, grimacing at the taste. I'm having fun. No, you're not. You're doing that thing where you disappear into your own head. Samuel swayed slightly, pointing an accusatory finger at me. What's wrong with you lately? You've been weird ever since Jack came home. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Just. I don't know. Different. Like you're always thinking about something else. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. Or someone else. Before I could respond, Samuel was pulled away by his chemistry class crush, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that maybe I wasn't hiding my feelings as well as I thought. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to get away from the suffocating heat of bodies pressed together and the music that seemed to throb in time with my pulse. I pushed through the crowd toward the back door, stepping out onto the wooden porch that overlooked the Morrisons' backyard. The cool night air hit my face like a blessing, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. The party sounds faded to a dull murmur behind me as I gripped the railing and stared up at the stars, trying to make sense of the mess in my head. That's when I heard the door open behind me. Running away from something? I spun around, and my heart nearly stopped. Jack stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the house. He had a beer in his hand and that same unreadable expression I'd been seeing more and more lately. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and he'd traded his usual perfectly pressed shirts for a simple black t-shirt that clung to his chest in ways that made my mouth go dry. I needed some air, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Jack stepped onto the porch, letting the door swing shut behind him. Mind if I join you? I wanted to say yes, I minded. I wanted to tell him to go back inside and leave me alone with my confusion and my racing heart. Instead, I found myself nodding, watching as he moved to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with beer and something uniquely him. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us staring out at the dark yard. I was hyper-aware of every breath he took, every small movement he made. When he shifted his weight, his arm brushed against mine, and I felt that familiar electric shock run through me. "You know," Jack said finally, his voice quieter than usual, "I used to hate you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected it, had told myself it was true for years, but hearing him say it out loud still made my chest tighten with pain. "I know. Do you?" He turned to look at me, and there was something raw in his expression that I'd never seen before. "Because I don't think you do. I don't think you understand why." I met his gaze, confused by the intensity one saw there. "Because I'm Samuel's annoying friend who's always hanging around your house. Because I'm loud and immature and No." The word came out sharp, cutting through my self-deprecating litany. "That's not why." "Then why?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and I immediately regretted it. I didn't want to know all the reasons Jack found me insufferable. I didn't want to hear him list my flaws. Jack took a long drink from his beer, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. When he looked at me again, his eyes were dark and troubled. "Because every time I saw you, every time you smiled or laughed or just existed in the same room as me, it reminded me of things I was trying really hard not to think about." "What things?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "Things about myself. Things about what I wanted." He paused, his knuckles white where they gripped his beer bottle. "Things about you." The world seemed to tilt around me. I stared at him, sure I had to be misunderstanding, sure I was reading too much into his words. "Jack, I don't. I hated you because you made me feel things I couldn't deal with," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Because every time you were around, I had to fight not to stare at you. I had to pretend I didn't notice the way you bit your lip when you were concentrating, or how your eyes lit up when you laughed, or how you smelled like that stupid vanilla body wash you use." My breath caught in my throat. "You noticed." I noticed everything. The admission seemed to be torn from somewhere deep inside him, and I hated myself for it. I hated that I couldn't stop thinking about you, couldn't stop wanting things I had no right to want. I felt like I was drowning, like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. "What kind of things?" Jack's laugh was bitter and self-deprecating. "You really want to know?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I wanted to know what it would feel like to hold your hand. I wanted to know if your skin was as soft as it looked. I wanted to know what you'd taste like if I kissed you." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I wanted to know what you'd look like first thing in the morning, all sleepy and rumpled in my bed." The words hit me like lightning, illuminating everything I'd been too afraid to hope for. "Jack, I know how fucked up that is," he continued, not letting me interrupt. "You're my little brother's best friend. You're supposed to be off limits. But I couldn't stop thinking about you, couldn't stop wanting you, and it was driving me crazy. So you decided to hate me instead," I said, understanding flooding through me. It was easier than admitting the truth. He turned to face me fully, and I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that made him look younger than his 21 years. "Easier than admitting that I'm gay. Easier than admitting that I've been in love with you for years and it's been eating me alive." The confession hung between us like a live wire, crackling with electricity and possibility. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it over the muffled party sounds from inside. "Years," I managed to whisper. "Since you were 16 and came to Samuel's birthday party wearing that blue shirt that made your eyes look like the ocean," he said, and I could hear the pain in his voice. "I took one look at you and knew I was screwed. Knew I was falling for someone I could never have." "You could have," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You could have had me. You've always been able to have me." Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixing with hope and disbelief. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it." The truth felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "I've been crazy about you for so long I can't remember when it started. I convinced myself you hated me because it was easier than hoping for something that seemed impossible." "Jesus, Leo." His voice was rough with emotion. "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" "I'm saying I've been in love with you too." The words felt like freedom, like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. "I'm saying all those times I thought you were looking at me with disgust, maybe you were actually fighting the same feelings I was." Jack set his beer down on the railing with shaking hands. This is insane. We can't. Samuel would never. I know it's complicated, I said, stepping closer to him. I know there are a million reasons why this is a bad idea. But I can't pretend anymore, Jack. I can't keep pretending I don't want you when you're standing here telling me you want me too. You don't understand, he said, his voice desperate. I'm not good at this. I've never been with a guy before. I've barely been with anyone. I spent so much time fighting who I am that I don't even know how to be honest about what I want. Then learn, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We can figure it out together. What if I hurt you? What if I'm too scared or too fucked up or... Then we'll deal with it. I reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the railing, feeling the way his fingers trembled under mine. But don't push me away because you're afraid. We've wasted enough time being afraid. Jack stared down at our joined hands, and I could see the internal war playing out across his face. I used to lie awake at night thinking about this, he said quietly. About what it would be like to touch you, to have you touch me back. I'd imagine what it would feel like to not have to hide anymore. We don't have to hide, I said. Not from each other. But Samuel. We'll figure out Samuel later. I squeezed his hand. Right now, it's just us. He looked up at me then, and I saw the moment he stopped fighting, the moment he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. I'm scared, Leo. So am I admitted. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Jack turned his hand over so our palms were pressed together, his fingers intertwining with mine. I need you to know something, he said, his voice intense. This isn't just about wanting you physically. I mean, God knows I do, but it's more than that. You're the first person who's ever made me feel like being myself might be okay. Being yourself is more than okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's beautiful. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't know how to be someone's boyfriend, especially not yours. You deserve someone who has their shit together, someone who's not still figuring out who they are. I don't want someone who has their shit together, I said, stepping even closer so there were only inches between us. I want you. Complicated, scared, beautiful you. Jack's free hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing over my cheekbone. You're going to be the death of me? You know that? I hope not, I said, leaning into his touch. I've got plans for us that require you to stay very much alive. He laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd ever heard from him. Plans. Lots of them. I moved closer still, until our bodies were almost touching. But they all start with you kissing me. Here. He glanced toward the house, where the party was still going strong. What if someone sees? Then they see, I said, surprised by my own boldness. I'm tired of hiding, Jack. I'm tired of pretending I don't want you when I've never wanted anything more in my life. Jack's eye searched mine, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he leaned closer, his hand still cupping my face. Are you sure? He whispered, his lips so close to mine I could feel his breath. I've never been more sure of anything. And then his mouth was on mine, soft and tentative at first, then more confident as I responded. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected all at once. It was gentle and desperate, sweet and hungry, years of denied longing poured into the simple act of our lips meeting. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. Jack rested his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed. Fuck, he breathed. That was worth waiting for? I suggested. Worth everything, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. We stood there for a moment, just breathing each other in, the weight of what had just happened settling between us. I could hear the party continuing inside, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just shifted on its axis. So what happens now? I asked. Jack pulled back to look at me, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns on my cheek. Now we figure out how to tell Samuel that his best friend and his brother are in love with each other. Are we? I asked, needing to hear him say it again. In love? I am, he said without hesitation. I'm completely, hopelessly, terrifyingly in love with you. Good, I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. Because I'm completely, hopelessly, terrifyingly in love with you too. Jack kissed me again, harder this time, his hands tangling in my hair. When we broke apart, he was smiling too, and it transformed his entire face. We're really doing this, he said, and it wasn't a question. We're really doing this, I confirmed. It's not going to be easy, he warned. I'm still figuring out how to be okay with being gay. I'm still scared of what people will think, what my parents will say. I'm probably going to fuck this up a dozen different ways. Then we'll unfuck it up, I said. Together. Together, he repeated, like he was testing the word on his tongue. I like the sound of that. Me too, I said, and kissed him again, because I could now. Because he was mine and I was his, and we didn't have to hide anymore. At least, not from each other. The silence stretched between us like a bridge I was terrified to cross. Jack's question hung in the air, raw and desperate, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. His eyes searched my face in the dim light filtering through the kitchen window, and I realized this was it, the moment that would either destroy everything or change it forever. Have I thought about us? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the distant music from inside. Jack, I've thought about nothing else for 3 years. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, and I watched his face transform. The careful mask he'd worn for so long cracked completely, revealing something vulnerable and desperate underneath. His breath caught, and for a moment he looked like he might break apart right there on the porch. I've been in love with you since I was 16, I continued, the confession pouring out of me like water through a broken dam. Every time I came over to see Samuel, I was hoping to catch a glimpse of you. Every conversation we had, every moment you were in the same room, I was fighting not to stare at you like some lovesick idiot. Jack's hands gripped the porch railing so tightly his knuckles went white. Leo, I know you hate me, I rushed on, unable to stop now that I'd started. I know you've always seen me as just Samuel's annoying little friend who hangs around too much. But I couldn't help it. I tried to get over it, tried to convince myself it was just a stupid crush, but it never went away. It just got stronger. Stop. Jack's voice was hoarse, strained. Stop saying I hate you. But you do. I don't hate you. The words exploded out of him with such force that I stepped back. God, Leo, I don't hate you. I hate myself. I hate how much I want you, how much I've always wanted you. I hate that you make me feel things I swore I'd never feel. My world tilted sideways. What? Jack ran his hands through his hair, pacing the small space of the porch like a caged animal. Do you have any idea what it's been like? Watching you grow up, watching you become this incredible person, and knowing I could never, knowing I shouldn't. Jack, I don't understand. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his eyes wild with something between desperation and relief. I've been fighting who I am for years, Leo. Fighting it so hard I thought I might actually win. And then you'd walk into a room, and I'd remember exactly why I was fighting in the first place. The words hit me like a physical blow. You mean? I mean you terrify me, he said, his voice breaking. You terrify me because when I look at you, I can't pretend anymore. I can't lie to myself about what I want, about who I am. Every time I see you laugh, every time you smile at something Samuel says, every time you're just you. I remember that I'm gay and I'm completely, hopelessly in love with my little brother's best friend. The confession hung between us like a living thing, and I felt my knees go weak. You're gay. I'm gay, he whispered, and saying it seemed to drain all the fight out of him. I'm gay and I've been hiding it from everyone, including myself, for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be honest about anything. But you dated girls in high school. You had girlfriends. I had beards, he said bitterly. I had props to help me play a part one was never meant for. Do you know what it's like to kiss someone and feel absolutely nothing? To go through the motions of being straight while your heart is breaking because the person you actually want is sitting across the dinner table talking to your little brother. My head was spinning. All this time you've been cold to me, distant. Because I was scared, he said, stepping closer. Because every time you looked at me, I felt like you could see right through me. Like you knew exactly what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And I couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle the possibility that you might figure it out. Figure what out? That I'm in love with you, he said, the words coming out in a rush. That I've been in love with you for years. That every time I was cruel to you, every time I acted like you didn't matter, I was dying inside because hurting you was killing me. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what he was saying. You're in love with me? Completely, he said, his voice soft now, broken. Utterly, completely, impossibly in love with you. And I know it's wrong. I know it's complicated because of Samuel. I know there are a million reasons why this is a terrible idea, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore. Leo. I can't keep hating myself for something that feels like the only real thing in my life. The porch seemed to spin around me. Everything I'd believed about Jack, about myself, about the dynamic between us, was crumbling and reshaping itself into something entirely new. I thought you could barely stand to be in the same room as me. I could barely stand to be in the same room as you, he said with a bitter laugh. But not because I didn't want to be there. Because I wanted to be there too much. Because every time I was near you, I wanted to touch you, talk to you, to be with you in ways that scared the hell out of me. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I was a coward, he said simply. Because I was so deep in the closet I couldn't even see the door anymore. Because I thought if I could just hate you enough, if I could just push you away hard enough, maybe I could push these feelings away too. And did it work? No, he whispered. It made everything worse. It made me hate myself more, made me feel like I was living someone else's life. And every time I saw you, every time you smiled at Samuel or laughed at something he said, I remembered what happiness looked like and how far away I was from it. I took a step toward him, my heart pounding. Jack. I know this is crazy, he said quickly. I know this changes everything. I know Samuel is going to. God, I don't know what Samuel is going to do. But I couldn't keep lying, Leo. I couldn't keep pretending that what I feel for you isn't real. What do you feel for me? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw years of hidden longing in his eyes. I feel like you're the only person who's ever made me want to be brave. Like you're the only one who's ever made me want to stop hiding. I feel like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, and seeing you tonight, having you here, it's the first time I've been able to breathe. The distance between us felt like an ocean, but also like nothing at all. I never knew, I whispered. I never even suspected. I'm good at hiding, he said with a sad smile. I've had a lot of practice. But you're not hiding now. No, he said, and I could hear the wonder in his voice. I'm not hiding now. I'm standing here telling you that I love you, that I've always loved you, and I'm terrified, but I'm also free. The word hung between us like a promise, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Free. Free to tell you that you're beautiful, he said, his voice gaining strength. Free to tell you that your laugh is my favorite sound in the world. Free to tell you that every time you bite your lip when you're thinking, I want to kiss you so badly it physically hurts. My breath caught. Jack. Free to tell you that I notice everything about you, he continued, stepping closer. The way you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating. The way you always sit on the left side of the couch when you're watching TV with Samuel. The way you hum when you're doing homework, usually off-key, but somehow perfect. You notice all that? I notice everything, he said, and now he was close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. I notice that you take your coffee with too much sugar and that you always wear that blue t-shirt when you're feeling anxious. I notice that you're kind to everyone, even when they don't deserve it. I notice that you make my brother laugh in ways that no one else can. And you hate that I make Samuel laugh? I love that you make Samuel laugh, he said fiercely. I love that you're good to him, that you're his friend, that you make him happy. I love everything about you, Leo. That's the problem. That's why I've been so scared. The confession settled between us like a bridge finally completed, and I felt myself stepping onto it. You love everything about me? Everything, he whispered. Even the things that drive me crazy. Especially the things that drive me crazy. Like what? Like the way you're looking at me right now, he said, his voice rough. Like maybe you don't think I'm completely insane for feeling this way. I don't think you're insane, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I think you're brave. Brave. He laughed, but it wasn't bitter this time. I'm the furthest thing from brave. I'm a mess, Leo. I'm a guy who spent 3 years being cruel to the person he loves because he was too scared to face the truth. But you're facing it now. Because I could not face it anymore, he said. Because pretending was killing me. Because seeing you tonight, having you here, it made me realize that I'd rather risk everything than spend another day lying to myself. The music from inside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in our bubble of honesty and possibility. What are you risking? Everything, he said simply. Samuel's trust. My family's expectations. The life I've been pretending to want. But mostly I'm risking you rejecting me. I'm risking you telling me that what I feel doesn't matter because I waited too long to say it. What if I told you it does matter? His eyes searched mine desperately. Does it? Jack, I said, reaching out to touch his arm. I just told you I've been in love with you for 3 years. Do you really think your feelings don't matter to me? He looked down at my hand on his arm like it was something miraculous. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. I don't know how to be in love with someone. I don't know how to stop being scared. You don't have to stop being scared, I said, stepping closer. You just have to be scared together with me instead of scared and alone. Together. If you want, I said, my heart hammering. If you think we could figure this out together. Even though it's complicated? Even though Even though, I said firmly. We'll figure out Samuel. We'll figure out everything. But Jack, I can't keep pretending I don't love you. Not now that I know you love me too. You really love me? I really love you, I said, and saying it felt like coming home. I love you enough to risk everything too. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with tears. I never let myself hope. Hope, I said, squeezing his arm. Hope for both of us. I love you, he whispered, like he was testing the words. I love you, Leo. I love you too, I whispered back, and watched his face transform with wonder. The weight of our confessions hung between us like a bridge we'd finally found the courage to cross. Jack's hands were still shaking as he ran them through his hair, his chest rising and falling with the effort of breathing through years of suppressed truth. I watched him struggle with the words that came next, knowing that whatever he said would change everything between us forever. Leo, I need you to understand something, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I say I've been fighting this, I mean I've been at war with myself every single day for the past 3 years. You walk into my house, into my life, and suddenly I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about who I was supposed to be. My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited for him to continue, afraid that even breathing too loudly might shatter this moment of raw honesty we'd carved out of years of pretending. I'm gay, Leo, Jack said, the words falling from his lips like stones he'd been carrying in his chest. I've known it for years, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase, just confusion. But then you'd laugh at something Samuel said, or you'd fall asleep on our couch during movie nights, and I'd catch myself staring at you like you were something precious I could never have. The admission hit me like a physical blow, not because it hurt, but because it was everything I'd dreamed of hearing wrapped in the pain of understanding how much he'd suffered. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between us, but I could see he wasn't finished bleeding out the truth. You represent everything I want, but was terrified to claim, he continued, his eyes finally meeting mine. Every time I looked at you, I saw a future I thought I wasn't allowed to have. A life where I could be honest about who I am, where I could love someone openly without hiding or making excuses. I felt tears threatening at the corners of my eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was sharing. Jack, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted, stepping closer. Because you need to know that my coldness, my cruelty, it was never about you not being good enough. It was about me being terrified that you were perfect, and that wanting you made me someone I wasn't ready to be. The space between us felt charged with electricity, years of suppressed longing crackling in the air. I could smell his cologne, could see the way his shirt clung to his chest, could count the flecks of gold in his brown eyes that I'd memorized from stolen glances. I used to lie awake at night, Jack admitted, his voice breaking slightly, thinking about what it would feel like to kiss you, to hold you, to wake up next to you. Then I'd hate myself for wanting those things, for being the kind of person who could fall for his little brother's best friend. The pain in his voice was unbearable, and I couldn't stop myself from reaching out, my fingers barely grazing his arm. You're not wrong for wanting those things. You're not wrong for being who you are. Jack's breath caught at my touch, and I saw something shift in his expression, a wall crumbling that had been holding him back. How can you say that when I've been nothing but cruel to you? When I've wasted years making you think I hated you? Because I understand now, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. I understand what it's like to be terrified of your own feelings, to think that loving someone makes you weak or broken or different in ways people won't accept. I took a shaky breath, knowing it was my turn to be vulnerable, to match his honesty with my own. Jack, do you want to know what the worst part has been for me? It wasn't thinking you hated me. It was loving you so completely while believing I was just Samuel's annoying friend who you had to tolerate. Jack's face crumpled at my words, and I could see the guilt and regret washing over him. Leo, God, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to feel. I would watch you with other people, I continued, needing to get it all out before I lost my nerve. and I could see glimpses of who you really were underneath all that distance you kept with me. You were funny and kind and brilliant, and I fell in love with that person even though I thought he'd never see me as anything more than an obligation. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over, and I didn't bother wiping them away. I convinced myself that unrequited love was better than no love at all. I told myself that being near you, even if it meant enduring your coldness, was enough. But it wasn't enough, Jack. It was slowly killing me. Jack's composure finally broke completely, and I watched as tears began streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice raw. "I'm so fucking sorry for making you feel like you weren't worthy of love, for making you think you had to settle for crumbs when you deserved everything." The apology hung between us, heavy with years of misdirected pain and wasted time. I could feel the shift happening, the way the air around us seemed to lighten as we finally released the secrets we'd been carrying. "I need you to know something else," Jack said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Every cruel thing I said, every time I was cold or dismissive, it was because I was fighting the urge to kiss you. I was terrified that if I let myself be kind to you, if I let myself enjoy your company the way I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to hide how I felt anymore." My heart was racing so fast I felt dizzy, the reality of his words sinking in. "You wanted to kiss me?" "Every fucking day," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "The way you bite your lip when you're thinking, the way you scrunch your nose when you laugh, the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. I've memorized everything about you because I couldn't help myself." The admission sent shockwaves through my entire body, years of fantasy colliding with the reality that Jack had been watching me just as intently as I'd been watching him. "I thought I was going crazy," I whispered. "Sometimes I'd catch you looking at me, and I'd wonder if maybe, but then you'd say something cutting, and I'd convince myself I was imagining things." "You weren't imagining anything," Jack said, taking another step closer. "I was looking because I couldn't stop myself, and then I'd panic and say something awful because I was terrified you'd figure out what I was thinking." We were close enough now that I could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. The space between us felt like a chasm we'd been afraid to cross for years, and now we were finally standing at the edge together. "Jack," I said softly, his name a prayer on my lips. "What happens now? With us, with Samuel, with everything?" He reached up and cupped my face with his hand, his thumb brushing away the tears on my cheek. "I don't know," he admitted. "I know it's complicated. I know there are going to be challenges we haven't even thought of yet. But Leo, I can't keep pretending I don't love you. I can't keep wasting time being afraid when you're standing right here telling me you feel the same way." The word love sent electricity through my entire body, confirmation of everything I'd dreamed of hearing. "You love me. I've been in love with you for years," he said, his voice steady now, certain. "I love the way you care about people, the way you make Samuel laugh, the way you never gave up on me even when I was horrible to you. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you make me want to be brave enough to be myself." I felt like I was floating, like years of weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "I love you too," I whispered, the words feeling like coming home. "I love you so much it scared me." Jack's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face into something beautiful and open. "We're really doing this, aren't we? We're really going to try." "I want to try," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "I want to see what we could be together, what we could build if we stopped being afraid." He nodded, his thumb still tracing patterns on my cheek. "It won't be easy. We'll have to tell Samuel eventually, figure out how to navigate family dynamics, deal with whatever reactions we get." "I know," I said, leaning into his touch. "But Jack, I've spent 3 years loving you in secret, thinking it was impossible. Now you're telling me you love me too, and suddenly everything feels possible." The smile that spread across his face was like watching the sunrise, hope and joy replacing years of pain and fear. "God, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe you're here, that you feel the same way." "I'm here," I assured him, covering his hand with mine. "I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed our confessions wasn't empty, it was full of possibility, crackling with the electricity of two people finally seeing each other clearly. Jack's thumb traced across my knuckles where our hands remained intertwined, and I felt like I was breathing properly for the first time in years. "So where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between us, weighted with all the complications we both knew were waiting. Jack's grip tightened on my hand. Carefully, he said, and there was something steadier in his voice now, more certain. We figure this out together. We take our time, and we do it right. I nodded, feeling relief wash over me. Part of me had been terrified that this moment of honesty would lead to panic, to Jack retreating back into his walls. But he was still here, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was something precious. What about Samuel? The question had been lurking at the edge of my thoughts, and I needed to voice it. Jack was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he considered. We'll tell him, he said finally. Eventually. When we're ready, when we know what this is. He gestured between us with his free hand. Samuel loves us both. It might be weird at first, but he'll come around. You think so? I couldn't hide the uncertainty in my voice. Samuel had been my best friend since we were kids. The thought of losing that friendship terrified me almost as much as the thought of losing Jack. I know so, Jack said, and his confidence steadied me. My brother's not exactly the type to let something like this break up relationships that matter to him. Besides, he added with a small smile, I think he's always suspected you had a thing for me. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Was I that obvious? Only to everyone except me, apparently. Jack's smile widened, and I saw a glimpse of the easy charm that had always made my heart race. Samuel used to tease me about how you'd go quiet whenever I walked into a room. I thought it was because you didn't like me. I was trying so hard not to stare, I admitted, laughing despite myself. Do you know how difficult it is to act normal around someone when all you want to do is kiss them? Jack finished, his voice dropping lower. Yeah, I'm starting to get an idea. The air between us shifted, becoming charged with a different kind of tension. Jack's eyes dropped to my mouth, and I felt my breath catch. We were still sitting on the porch steps, the party continuing inside without us, but suddenly it felt like the rest of the world had disappeared. Leo, Jack said my name like a question, like a request. I answered by closing the distance between us. Our first kiss was soft, tentative, both of us testing the waters of this new reality. Jack's lips were warm and slightly chapped, and he tasted like beer and possibility. When we broke apart, we stayed close, foreheads touching, sharing the same breath. Fuck, Jack whispered, and I felt the word against my lips. I've wanted to do that for so long. How long? I asked, needing to know, needing to map the timeline of this thing between us. Since you came over for my graduation party last year, he said without hesitation. You were wearing that blue button-down, and you laughed at something Samuel said, and I couldn't stop looking at you. It scared the hell out of me. I remembered that night. I'd been so nervous about seeing Jack after months of his college absence that I'd changed shirts 3 times. Knowing that he'd noticed, that he'd been affected, it felt like rewriting history. I thought about you every day while I was at school, Jack continued, his voice low and honest. I'd be sitting in class or hanging out with friends, and suddenly I'd remember the way you looked at me, or how you'd bite your lip when you were concentrating on something, and I'd have to excuse myself because I couldn't handle it. I thought about you too, I confessed. All the time. I used to make excuses to come over here just hoping I'd catch a glimpse of you when you called Samuel. We kissed again, longer this time, with more certainty. Jack's hand came up to cup my face, and I felt years of tension and longing pour out of both of us. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. We should probably head back inside, Jack said, though he made no move to let go of me. Probably, I agreed, equally reluctant to break this moment. But eventually, we did. Jack stood first, then offered me his hand to help me up. As we walked toward the door, he paused and turned to me. Leo, I need you to know, this isn't just about tonight, or the beer, or some experimental phase. This is real for me. You're real for me. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. It's real for me too, I said. It always has been. Jack smiled, and for the first time since I'd known him, it was completely open, completely unguarded. Good, he said. Because I'm not letting you go now that I finally have you. As we walked back into the house together, I felt the weight of years of secrecy lifting off my shoulders. We still had challenges ahead, conversations to have, relationships to navigate, a future to figure out together. But for the first time, I believed we actually had a future. Inside, the party was still going strong, but everything felt different now. When Samuel appeared with fresh beers, chattering about something that had happened while we were outside, I caught Jack's eye across the room. He winked at me, and I felt my heart skip. This was just the beginning.